Caitlin Clark.
50
down more than 50%.
NBA ratings crashed 55% the moment one player got injured. That's not just a dip, that's a league-threatening collapse that exposed everything wrong with women's professional basketball. We're about to expose exactly how fragile the WNBA's so-called success really is, why veteran players are secretly panicking about their next contracts, and the shocking return announcement that could either save or completely embarrass an entire sport. What you're about to discover will change how you see the league forever. When Caitlin Clark went down with her injury, the WNBA didn't just lose a player, they lost their entire identity. The data is absolutely brutal and impossible to ignore. Nationally televised Fever games dropped from averaging 1.8 million viewers to just 847,000 viewers. That's a 53% nosedive that would make any network executive break out in cold sweats. But here's where it gets even more devastating. Betting interest on Fever games plummeted by 50% at major sportsbooks. Casual fans weren't just changing the channel, they were pulling their wallets out of the equation entirely. The league built its recent momentum on Clark's shoulders, and without her, everything crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Nothing exposed the WNBA's tone-deaf leadership like Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe telling disappointed fans to grow up when they wanted refunds for Clarkless games. Picture this scenario. You drop hundreds of dollars on premium tickets specifically to watch the league's biggest draw. Then you're told she's injured and you should just deal with it. These weren't $10 nosebleed seats we're talking about. Fans were paying top dollar, sometimes over $200 just to witness Clark's magic in person. When those same tickets started getting resold for under $10 on secondary markets, that wasn't a pricing adjustment. That was a complete market collapse. Bird and Rapinoe essentially mocked the very fans whose enthusiasm was about to negotiate their next salary increases. Pure genius, right? While Clark was sidelined, the media desperately tried pushing Angel Reese as the league's alternative attraction, and it backfired spectacularly. Reese has become such a liability on the court that her missed layups turned into viral memes across social media platforms. BET gave her their Sportswoman of the Year award for the third consecutive year, somehow beating out Asia Wilson, a three-time MVP and two-time WNBA champion. The announcement created such confusion that people thought it was satire. Every time CBS Sports tried highlighting Reese's dominance, they could only find two scoring plays worth showing. One being an uncontested layup they captioned as, "making it look easy." The continued gaslighting around Reese's fundamental skill gaps isn't just embarrassing for her, it's actively damaging the league's credibility with new audiences who can clearly see the difference between hype and reality. Even with Clark healthy earlier in the season, the Fever were playing basketball that would put insomniacs to sleep. Head coach Stephanie White somehow took a team built around Clark's lightning-fast tempo and turned them into the 2004 Detroit Pistons. All defense, no excitement, zero entertainment value. The Fever were supposed to be the league's marquee attraction, the team that showcased everything fun about women's basketball. Instead, they've been grinding out possessions like they're protecting a lead in Game 7 of the finals. Clark thrives in transition and pick-and-roll situations, pushing pace and creating highlights that generate social media buzz. Without that system supporting her strengths, even Clark looked ordinary at times. When your biggest star can't showcase what makes her special, you're not just wasting talent, you're actively sabotaging your own product. The timing of Clark's injury couldn't have been more catastrophic for WNBA players entering CBA negotiations. Every owner in those boardrooms now has the ultimate trump card. What happens when Clark gets hurt again? The ratings crash provided concrete evidence that the league's financial health depends almost entirely on one player's availability. Players were expecting massive salary increases based on recent viewership spikes and attendance boosts, but those numbers evaporated the moment Clark hit the injury report. Union representatives, who thought they held all the leverage, suddenly found themselves explaining why ticket prices collapsed and TV ratings flatlined. No amount of Sue Bird complaints or Angel Reese awards can change the fundamental math. Without Clark, the WNBA returns to its previous financial reality, and everyone knows it. Road attendance for Fever games dropped 22% without Clark, but those numbers don't capture the full devastation. Families were canceling cross-country trips, demanding refunds, and completely changing vacation plans once Clark was ruled out. The secondary ticket market told the real story. Seats that were selling for premium prices suddenly couldn't find buyers at face value. Some venues were practically giving away tickets just to avoid the embarrassment of obvious empty sections on television broadcasts. The Atlanta Dreams Arena already looks like a shopping mall food court on good days, but other teams started experiencing similar optics issues when the Clark effect disappeared. Professional sports leagues live and die by their ability to create must-see events. And without Clark, WNBA games return to their previous status as optional entertainment. Sports media coverage follows eyeballs, and when Clark went down, the headlines dried up faster than a desert stream. ESPN's coverage shifted from daily Clark updates to maybe one story per week about the entire league. Social media engagement plummeted across all WNBA accounts, not just the Fever's official pages. The controversial moments that typically generate weeks of debate and discussion simply weren't happening because casual fans weren't watching closely enough to notice or care. Sports talk radio stations that had been dedicating segments to WNBA storylines quietly returned to their regular programming schedules. Even negative coverage disappeared, which is actually worse for the league than criticism. Being ignored is the kiss of death in modern sports media. The silence was deafening and financially devastating. The old guard loves bragging about loyal WNBA fans who supported the league through its struggles, but those core supporters can't sustain professional sports economics. You need casual fans, buying merchandise, attending games occasionally, and generating social media buzz that attracts sponsors and advertisers. Clark brought millions of casual observers who were genuinely curious about women's basketball, many for the first time in their lives. When she got injured, those fans didn't suddenly develop deep appreciation for the league's other storylines. They simply moved on to other entertainment options. Basketball is competing with Netflix, TikTok, video games, and countless other distractions for people's attention. Without a transcendent star like Clark creating appointment television, casual fans have zero reason to choose WNBA games over everything else, demanding their time. Sportsbooks saw 50% less action on Fever games without Clark, which reveals something crucial about fan engagement that traditional metrics might miss. When people stop betting on games, they're not just less interested financially. They're emotionally disconnected from the outcomes. Betting markets are incredibly efficient at measuring genuine interest versus manufactured hype. The dramatic drop in wagering activity proved that Clark's appeal wasn't just about basketball purists or social justice supporters. She was attracting the broader sports gambling audience that drives significant revenue streams. Caesars Sportsbook reported that betting volume on Fever games was roughly half of their season opening levels, indicating that even the gambling community recognized the difference between Clark-led games and everything else the league offered. If this analysis is opening your eyes to the WNBA's real situation, smash that like button and subscribe for more honest breakdowns of what's actually happening in women's sports. We're just getting started with the most shocking parts of this story. Stephanie White's coaching decisions during Clark's absence exposed fundamental problems with how the Fever were constructed and managed. The team played with zero speed, abandoning the transition offense and pick-and-roll systems that made Clark so effective. White essentially admitted that her offensive schemes couldn't function without Clark's specific skill set, which raises serious questions about her adaptability as a coach. Professional basketball teams need systems that can survive personnel changes, not collapse entirely when one player is unavailable. The Fever's struggles without Clark weren't just about missing her talent, they revealed a coaching staff that had become completely dependent on her abilities to mask their own strategic limitations. Good coaches find ways to maximize their available talent, not watch helplessly as their team becomes unwatchable. The Fever's front office strategy of surrounding Clark with veterans backfired spectacularly once she was sidelined. These older players couldn't match Clark's pace, couldn't execute her preferred offensive sets, and couldn't generate the energy that made the team appointment television. Instead of building a roster that complemented Clark's strengths while maintaining functionality in her absence, they created a team that only worked with her on the court. The veterans who were supposed to provide leadership and stability actually made the team less entertaining and less effective. This roster construction failure cost the organization millions in lost revenue and damaged the WNBA's momentum during a crucial season. Smart teams build depth and versatility, not complete dependence on a single player's unique abilities. While Indiana struggled with identity and pace, the expansion Golden State Valkyries provided a perfect contrast of how to build an entertaining product. The Valkyries were selling out games in full-size NBA arenas, playing fast-paced basketball with genuine personality and energy. They proved that WNBA teams could create excitement and draw crowds without relying on a single superstar to carry the entire load. Their success highlighted everything wrong with how other franchises, especially Indiana, were approaching team building and game presentation. The Valkyries understood that professional sports is entertainment first, and they delivered a product that kept fans engaged regardless of individual player status. Their approach made other teams look amateur by comparison, especially those struggling with basic concepts like pace and energy. Clark's clearance to return came at the perfect dramatic moment, just as the league's struggles were becoming undeniable. The announcement itself reportedly caused viewership projections to jump 95% overnight, which sounds like hyperbole until you consider the alternative entertainment options competing for audience attention. Social media immediately exploded with highlight compilations, return predictions, and ticket price discussions. The timing couldn't have been more cinematic, returning against the New York Liberty, the same team that drew 3.3 million viewers in their previous matchup. Everything was aligning for the ultimate statement game, the moment that would either validate Clark's importance or expose the league's dependence on manufactured drama. The anticipation was building towards something that felt genuinely historic. Clark's return game against the Liberty had every element needed for massive television ratings and cultural impact. The Liberty were undefeated, the league's best team, and the previous matchup had been competitive despite Clark playing injured. Now she was returning at full health, with weeks of pent-up frustration, against the premier opponent at the perfect time for maximum attention. The narrative wrote itself. Could Clark immediately restore the Fever's competitiveness and entertainment value? Would the ratings surge back toward record levels? The game represented everything the WNBA had been trying to build toward for decades. A must-watch event featuring genuine star power and championship-level competition. Early predictions suggested viewership could approach 4 million people, which would have been unprecedented for women's professional basketball. The ratings crash during Clark's absence completely shifted the power dynamics in upcoming CBA negotiations. Players who thought they held all the leverage suddenly found themselves explaining why the league's popularity disappeared overnight. Union representatives couldn't credibly argue for massive salary increases when television ratings, attendance figures, and betting interest had collapsed so dramatically. Owners now had concrete evidence that the WNBA's recent financial success was built on incredibly fragile foundations. Every negotiation would include the unspoken question: what happens when Clark retires, gets injured again, or simply has an off year? The union's negotiating position had been fundamentally weakened by objective market data that couldn't be disputed or spun positively. Players were about to discover that their perceived value and their actual market value were very different numbers. One player carrying an entire professional sports league is neither sustainable nor healthy for long-term growth. The Clark effect exposed how shallow the WNBA's talent pool and marketing appeal really were compared to other major sports leagues. When LeBron James or Tom Brady were injured, their leagues didn't experience 55% rating drops because multiple stars could generate interest and excitement. The WNBA's over-reliance on Clark revealed systemic problems with player development, marketing strategies, and competitive balance that wouldn't disappear even if Clark had a Hall of Fame career. The league needed to use Clark's popularity as a launching pad for broader growth, not as a crutch that masked fundamental structural weaknesses. Without addressing these deeper issues, the WNBA would remain vulnerable to similar collapses whenever their singular attraction was unavailable. Clark's return against the Liberty was shaping up to be the most important regular season game in WNBA history. Everything the league had been building toward, all the mainstream attention they generated, would be validated or destroyed in a single performance. The pressure was unprecedented. Could Clark immediately return to her previous level? Would the ratings surge back to record numbers? Could the Fever demonstrate that they were actually competitive without relying on Clark to single-handedly create entertainment value? 4 million viewers seemed achievable given the storyline, the opponent, and the pent-up demand from fans who had been waiting weeks for must-watch basketball. The game represented a crossroads moment that would define how seriously the sports world took women's professional basketball going forward. Even Clark's harshest critics would have to acknowledge her impact after witnessing the league's struggles during her absence. The numbers were too dramatic, the contrast too obvious, and the financial implications too significant to dismiss or rationalize away. This wasn't about individual statistics or highlight reels. It was about fundamental market forces that determine whether professional sports leagues survive or disappear. Clark had become the WNBA's most valuable asset, their only reliable draw for casual fans. and their primary hope for long-term financial sustainability. The injury absence had provided an accidental controlled experiment that proved her importance beyond any reasonable doubt. Her return would either confirm that assessment or reveal that the league's problems ran even deeper than anyone imagined. The supreme irony of Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe telling fans to grow up about wanting refunds became even more apparent as CBA negotiations approached. These same veterans were about to demand salary increases based entirely on the revenue and attention that disappointed fans had generated through their Clark-focused interest. Professional sports is ultimately an entertainment business, and customers have every right to expect the advertised product or seek compensation when it's unavailable. Bird and Rapinoe's dismissive attitude toward the very people funding their paychecks revealed a fundamental disconnect between WNBA veterans and the reality of sports economics. The fans they mocked were the same ones whose ticket purchases, merchandise buying, and television viewing would determine whether future salary negotiations resulted in meaningful increases or continued financial struggles. Clark's injury absence might have saved the WNBA from even more devastating future collapses by exposing their overdependence while there was still time to address it. Imagine if this reality had been discovered during playoff games, or during a season when CBA negotiations were already finalized, or when major television contracts were being renewed. The timing, while painful, provided valuable data about what the league needed to build sustainable success beyond any single player. Smart organizations would use this information to develop deeper talent, create multiple marketing focal points, and build systems that could generate interest regardless of individual availability. The alternative, continuing to pretend that the league's recent success was broadly based rather than Clark-dependent, would have led to even more dramatic failures when the truth eventually emerged. Clark's return happens in 48 hours against the Liberty, and we're about to witness the most important comeback in women's sports history. Will the ratings surge back to record levels? Can the fever immediately return to competitive basketball? Will this game validate everything we've discussed about Clark's unprecedented impact on the league? The answer will either cement her status as the WNBA's savior or reveal that the league's problems run even deeper than her individual brilliance can solve. Either way, we're witnessing history unfold in real time, and there's no walking back from whatever happens next. This content is not professional sports or financial advice. Consult qualified experts for investment decisions